Magnificent Mabel. Adim's apartment is in a building that still has its original Art Deco lift, the kind with a brass gate you have to pull closed by hand. Elsie rides up alone, watching the floors tick past through the grill. She is wearing a clean blouse and the burgundy homopeds she bought on Daphne's advice hide the blood, Daphne had said, and they had both laughed, and now Daphne is not here and the shoes are just shoes. The apartment is small and warm and cluttered with the debris of two people who work too much. Camera equipment stacked in corners like sleeping animals, coffee cups breeding on side tables, a whiteboard covered in editing notes in three different colors. Mira, Adim's wife, has made samosas that fill the room with the smell of cumin and potato. Sasha, Libby's girlfriend, has brought a bottle of wine and is opening it with a corkscrew shaped like a kangaroo. Peter arrives last, wearing a blue-collared shirt Elsie has never seen before, his gray hair combed back from his forehead in a way that makes him look younger and more nervous. They arrange themselves on the sofa and armchairs like people waiting for a diagnosis. The television screen is black. The samosas sit on the coffee table, untouched. Libby stands by the laptop, her finger hovering over the trackpad. She looks at Elsie. Before I press play, I want to say something. We came to your door because we thought we were making a true crime documentary. We thought the story was about a murder. It wasn't. It was about a child who was failed by every single adult who should have protected her, and then punished for surviving. She presses play. The documentary opens on an aerial shot of Kenny Lane, the rows of small houses like teeth in a jaw, the blue smear of the bay in the distance, and then it pushes in slowly toward Elsie's front porch, with its peeling paint and its potted geraniums, and its view of nothing in particular. Libby's voiceover begins, calm and measured. In 1959, Mabel Waller became the youngest person in Australian history to be convicted of murder. For 66 years, she has not told her story. This is that story. Elsie watches herself on the screen. She watches herself at her own kitchen table, the morning light slanting through the window behind her, talking about Kitty and the unlocked porch door and the polio that took a baby she cannot remember. She watches herself describe her mother's fall from the hospital balcony, the way her mother's dress flared, the way there was no sound. She watches herself say the word delighted when describing Mr. Lolka's death, and then she watches herself explain why, the fiancé, the other student, the sports shed, the locked door. She watches herself weep on camera when she talks about Daphne, and she watches Libby's hand reach into the frame and take hers. In the apartment, Elsie weeps again. She does not try to stop it. The tears run down the creases of her face and into the collar of her blouse, and she lets them. Peter reaches across the arm of the sofa and takes her hand. His palm is warm and dry, his fingers calloused from a lifetime of outdoor work. She does not pull away. She has spent 66 years pulling away from hands that reached for her. She is tired of it. The documentary runs for an hour and 20 minutes. When it ends, the screen goes black, and then white text appears, letter by letter, to Cess and Ness, to Daphne, to Persephone, and to all the girls the world has called mad. No one speaks for a long time. Mira is the first to break the silence. She is crying openly, her mascara tracking down her cheeks. That was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. Sasha has her face pressed into Libby's shoulder. Adim has his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Libby is watching Elsie, her expression unreadable behind the sheen of her own tears. And, Clusis, Forder. Did I do it right? Elsie asks. Her voice is hoarse, scraped raw. Libby crosses the room and kneels in front of Elsie's chair. She takes both of Elsie's hands, the good one and the one in the cast, and holds them carefully, like something precious and breakable. You did it exactly right, Libby says. Exactly right. They upload the documentary that night. Adim titles it Magnificent Mabel, as Elsie instructed. The thumbnail is a photograph of Elsie on her porch, tall and straight-backed in her armchair, her white hair pulled back, her expression unyielding. She is not smiling. She is not apologizing. She is simply there. By morning, it has 1.5 million views. By the end of the week, 7.5 million. The flowers begin arriving on Tuesday. Bunches of native blooms, waratahs, and banksias and wattle wrapped in brown paper and left on Elsie's porch by people she has never met. Handwritten notes tucked between the stems. We are sorry. We were wrong. Thank you for telling your story. You deserved better. We all failed you. Elsie reads each one, then stacks them in a shoebox and puts the shoebox in the spare bedroom with the boxed photographs. 4. A police officer, not baldy or hairy, a younger woman with a kind, angular face and sergeant stripes, knocks on Elsie's door on Wednesday morning and says the Victoria Police would like to issue a formal apology for the way she was treated during the investigation into Ishan's death. The officer reads from a prepared statement, her voice steady but her eyes flicking to Elsie's face as though waiting for something. Elsie accepts the apology with a single nod and closes the door. She does not know if she believes it. She does not know if it matters. On Thursday afternoon, Elsie is in the garden, pulling weeds from the bed beside the porch, when she hears a low droning sound. She straightens up, one hand pressed to her aching lower back, and shades her eyes. A small aircraft is crossing the sky above Kenny Lane, flying low, towing a banner behind it. The banner is white with red lettering, and the lettering is large enough to read from the ground. Forgiveus Ilse stands in her garden with dirt on her hands and her mouth slightly open and watches the plane drag those 3 words across the blue. The plane banks slowly, circles back, makes another pass. The banner ripples in the wind. The words hold. She does not know who paid for it. She does not know if she forgives them, any of them, all of them. The town that called her a baby killer when she was 14. The journalists who branded her Mad Mabel and never asked about the baby. The police who took her shoe and her dignity and her 60 years of quiet. But something loosens in her chest. A knot she has been carrying so long she forgot it was there, and she finds that she can breathe around it now. Inside, she picks up the telephone and calls Libby. "Did you see it?" Libby asks, before Elsie can speak. "I saw it. The comments are, Elsie, the comments are extraordinary. People are writing to say they cried. People are writing to say they have children and they can't imagine. There's a petition going around to get your conviction reviewed. A legal clinic in Melbourne has offered to take your case pro bono." Elsie sits down at the kitchen table. Nugget jumps into her lap, turns 3 tight circles, and settles. Outside, the plane is now a distant speck, the banner a suggestion of red against the sky. "I don't need my conviction reviewed," Elsie says. "I killed him. I've never denied it." There is a pause on the line. Then Libby says, gently, they want to review whether it should have been murder at all, whether a 15-year-old girl who had been abandoned and abused and blamed for things she didn't do, who walked in on her father standing over the body of the only adult who had ever truly protected her, whether that girl should have been convicted of murder. Elsie is quiet. The kettle on the stove has gone cold. The afternoon light is long and golden through the kitchen window. "I'll think about it," she says. A child's question. The morning after the banner, Persephone appears. Elsie is in the garden again, not weeding now, just sitting on the porch step with her face tilted to the sun, when she hears the familiar slap of small sneakers on pavement and looks up to find Persephone standing at the low fence, a key glinting in her fist. "Persephone," greeted Danger. "You gave me this," Persephone says, holding up the key. "Remember? So I could feed Nugget if you were in hospital." "I remember. Can I come in?" Elsie gestures at the gate. Persephone lets herself through, drops the key into the pocket of her shorts, and climbs up onto the porch step beside Elsie. She is wearing a t-shirt with a unicorn on it, and her hair has been braided badly by someone who was clearly learning, probably Roxanne, into 2 asymmetrical pigtails. "I watched your movie," Persephone says. "Did you?" "Mum and me watched it. Mum cried. She said she was sorry she didn't trust you before. She said she was wrong." Elsie absorbs this. She thinks about Roxanne on the porch that night, her face a mask, saying Shane showed up again. She thinks about Roxanne's gratitude, unsaid but visible, when Elsie swore to protect Persephone with her life. "Was Daphne really not real?" Persephone asks. The question is so direct, so undecorated, that Elsie feels it in her sternum like the vibration of a struck bell. She looks down at the child, at the unicorn shirt and the bad braids and the small brown hands resting on the step like resting on the world. "She was real to me," Elsie says. "She was the most real person in my life for 76 years. Persephone frowns, a concentrated furrow between her eyebrows that makes her look momentarily 40 years old. "But she was imaginary." "Yes, so she didn't exist." "She existed in here," Elsie says, touching her chest. "And in here," she touches her temple. What matters is that she made me brave when I would have been afraid. She made me laugh when I would have cried. She saved my life, Persephone, over and over. Does that count as not existing? Persephone thinks about this. She brings her knees up to her chest and wraps her arms around them. I had an imaginary friend once, she says, when I was 5. Her name was Princess Sparkle Sparkle, and she could fly. Could she? She flew away when Daddy started being mean. I think she was scared. Elsie puts her arm around Persephone's shoulders. The gesture is unpracticed, a little stiff, but it lands and it holds. She feels the child's weight settle against her side, a small warm pressure, a breathing anchor. Daphne never flew away, Elsie says. She was braver than I was. That's good, Persephone says. That's good, Elsa. Elsie does not correct her. She has stopped correcting her. The name Elsa has become something she answers to, something she almost likes, a name that belongs not to Mad Mabel Waller or to the woman in the documentary, but to a tall old lady on a porch who has, against all odds and intentions, been chosen by a child. They sit together for a long time, watching the street. Mrs. Nigen's cat crosses the road with the slow, entitled gait of a creature that owns everything it surveys. Peter's truck turns into the driveway a few houses down, and Peter gets out and waves, and Elsie raises her hand in return. Nugget appears at the screen door and whines until Persephone gets up to let him out. Elsa? Persephone says, cradling Nugget against her unicorn shirt. Yes? Do you have any real friends now? Like real ones? Elsie thinks about the morning light in Adim's apartment. She thinks about Mira's samosas and Sasha's kangaroo corkscrew and the way Libby's voice cracked in the documentary voiceover when she said a child failed by everyone. She thinks about Peter's hand on hers, warm and solid, holding on. She thinks about Joan, who was once her accuser and now brings her groceries and asks about her lawyer. She thinks about the shoebox of handwritten notes in the spare bedroom. I think I do, Elsie says. I think I have several. Persephone looks up at her and grins, a wide, gap-toothed declaration of a grin that takes up her whole face. Good, she says. That means you don't need Princess Sparkle Sparkle, which is a relief, Elsie says dryly, as I suspect she would clash with the decor. Persephone giggles. Nugget licks her chin. The morning sun climbs higher over Kenny Lane, and the street goes about its business. And Elsie sits on her porch step with a child leaning against her side and a dog in the child's lap and a key in the child's pocket and a story out in the world now. A story that cannot be unstoried, and she finds, to her considerable surprise, that she is not afraid. The night Shane came back. Roxanne has a night shift. Elsie knows this because Roxanne told her a cleaning job at an office building in the city, 12 floors of cubicles and break rooms to vacuum before dawn. Persephone is staying with Elsie. This has become routine now, a thing Elsie no longer resists or resents. The spare bedroom has been aired and remade, its shrine dismantled, its dust covers lifted, its single bed dressed with fresh sheets printed with small blue flowers. Persephone calls it my room, and Elsie does not correct her. The evening is ordinary. Persephone eats buttered pasta at the kitchen table while Elsie drinks tea and watches the news with the sound off. Then the bath, the protest, the negotiations over pajamas, the back rub that goes on for what feels like geological epochs. Persephone's demands are so specific and so relentless that Elsie at one point hears herself say, "Child, you would have made an excellent prison warden." What's a prison warden? Persephone asks. Never mind, go to sleep. By 9 o'clock, Persephone is asleep in the blue flower bed, Nugget curled in the hollow behind her knees. Elsie checks the lock on the front door twice, pushes a kitchen chair under the handle for good measure, and settles into her armchair with a book she does not read. She is not expecting to sleep, and she does not sleep. This is a vigil, and she knows it. Somewhere out in the dark, Shane is watching. Roxanne said he had been outside her house again, waiting for her after work. He asked me to take him back, Roxanne had said, standing on Elsie's porch with her keys clutched in her fist like a weapon. When I said no, he got quiet. The quiet is worse than the shouting. He said he knows about you. He said he knows Persephone stays here now. He said things about you, things he read online, how you're a convicted killer, how you're not safe to be around children. He's wrong, Elsie had said. I know, but he's trying to build a case, trying to make it look like him putting Persephone in danger by letting her stay with you. Elsie had thought about this. About the documentary and the banner and the flowers, and the police apology and the petition about how for every person who wrote, "Forgive us," there was surely another who wrote, "Once a killer, always a killer." Shane had found those ones. "When is your next shift?" Elsie had asked. "Tomorrow night. Bring her here. I'll keep her safe." Now it is tomorrow night, and the house is dark, and Elsie is watching the street through the gap in the curtains. The cast on her left wrist itches. The book in her lap is unopened. The clock on the mantel ticks toward 11, midnight, 1. At 2 in the morning, a car engine rumbles at the mouth of Kenny Lane. It is a sound Elsie has learned to recognize, the low, uneven growl of an engine in need of maintenance, the kind of sound that belongs to a vehicle too old or too neglected to move quietly. She parts the curtain with 2 fingers. A dark sedan has pulled to the curb outside Roxana's house. The headlights go off. The driver's door opens. Shane steps out. He is taller than Elsie remembered, broader through the shoulders, the streetlight catching the angular planes of his face and the dark ink of a tattoo climbing past his collar. He stands for a moment beside the car, looking at Roxana's dark house. Then he turns his head and looks directly at Elsie's house. Elsie does not move from the window. She does not flinch. She has faced worse than a man in a dark car. She killed her father with an umbrella when she was 15 years old. She has been Mad Mabel for longer than Shane has been alive. If he thinks she will cower behind her curtains, he has badly misjudged his opponent. Shane crosses the street. He walks up Roxana's porch steps and tries the door. Locked. He circles around to the side of the house, disappearing into the shadows. Elsie waits, counting her breaths, counting the seconds. 1 minute passes. 2. He reappears. He is holding a phone to his ear. No, not holding, speaking into it. A low mutter she cannot hear through the glass. Then he lowers the phone and looks at Elsie's house again. He smiles. It is not a pleasant smile. It is the kind of smile that says, "I see you. I know you're watching. I'm not done here." He gets back into the sedan. The engine turns over. The car rolls slowly down Kenny Lane and disappears around the corner, and the street falls back into its night silence. Elsie stays at the window until the sky begins to lighten. Morning decision. When Persephone wakes, Elsie is in the kitchen making pancakes. Persephone appears in the doorway, rumpled and blinking, her braids half undone and her unicorn shirt twisted sideways. "You look like you didn't sleep," Persephone says. "How observant. Are you okay, Elsa?" Elsie flips a pancake onto a plate and pushes it across the table. She pours syrup in a spiral the way she has learned Persephone likes. She sits down across from the child and folds her hands on the table. "Persephone, I need to tell you something." Persephone stops mid-reach for the syrup. She has learned to read Elsie's tone, the particular gravity that means listen, that means this matters. "Your father was here last night, outside your house." The child's face does a complicated thing, fear and anger and a weary knowing that no 8-year-old should wear, all passing across her features like weather. "Did he try to come in?" "The door was locked. He left." "But he'll come back. He always comes back." "Yes," Elsie says, "he always does. But here is what I need you to understand. As long as you are in this house, you are under my protection. I have made a promise to your mother, and I am making that promise to you now. I will not let him hurt you." "Do you believe me?" Persephone looks at Elsie across the table, pancakes cooling between them, the morning sun catching the dust motes floating in the kitchen air. "I believe you," Persephone says. "Good. Now eat your pancakes." The interrogation resumes. At 10 o'clock, Libby and Adim arrive for what they are calling a follow-up interview, though really it is an excuse to check on Elsie, to bring her a box of brownies Mira has baked, to sit in her lounge room and talk about the documentary and the petition and the strange new shape of a life that has suddenly become public. But the conversation turns, as conversations do, toward the things not yet said. "There's one thing we didn't cover in the documentary," Libby says carefully. She is sitting on Elsie's sofa, a teacup balanced on her knee, her notebook unopened on the cushion beside her. Adim is behind the camera, framing a loose shot, not recording yet. "Only one?" Elsie says. The baby you had in the institution. When we were filming, you told us Billy Harris was the father. The baby was a boy. You heard him cry once, and then he was taken. But you never said what happened to him after. Where he went. Who took him?" Elsie looks at her hands. The cast on her left wrist is clean and white. a blank surface waiting for new signatures. She has kept it that way since Persephone signed it. I didn't say because I didn't know for a long time, she says. When I was released from the institution years later, after I had served my time in the mental health facility and was permitted to live in the community, I began working. I worked in a library. The head librarian was a woman named Ness. Libby's teacup stops halfway to her mouth. Ness, she repeats. Sess is Ness. Yes, Elsie says. Ness survived. She wasn't at home the night my father came with the umbrella. She was at the library, closing up. She came home and found the police and the blood, and Sess was already gone. Adim lowers the camera. The room is very quiet. Ness grieved for years, Elsie continues. She never married, never had another relationship, but she wanted a child. And not long after I was incarcerated while I was still in the mental institution, a baby came to her through an adoption agency. A newborn boy. She named him Peter. A sound comes from somewhere off camera. A gasp. It is not Libby. Libby has her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide and filling. It is not Adim. It is Elsie herself, the sound of a woman finally saying aloud the things she has carried for 66 years. Peter, Elsie says, is my son. The name hangs in the air. Adim sets the camera down altogether. Libby is crying, soundlessly, the tears streaming into the corners of her mouth. Elsie does not cry. She has cried enough. She has cried for this child, this man now, this gray-haired man she has watched from her porch for years. The neighbor who brings her bins in on collection day, the man whose photographs she once collected in a secret shrine, she has cried for him in the dark of the spare bedroom when she thought no one could hear. End quote. Peter knows, Elsie says. He found out years ago, after his adoptive mother after Ness died. He found the adoption records, traced his birth mother to the institution, and then to Kenny Lane. He moved into the street deliberately. He has been watching over me for 14 years without ever telling me who he was. Why didn't he tell you? Libby whispers. Because he was afraid I wouldn't want to know. He thought I had given him up. He didn't know they took him from me. He didn't know I never held him. He didn't know. Elsie looks down at her hands again, at the cast with its white plaster and its empty space. He knows now, she says. We talked. After the documentary, he came over the night of the screening, after everyone else had gone. He sat in this room, in that very chair, and he called me Mum. The end. He called me Mum, and I held his hand, and we both wept until we couldn't breathe. Libby leans across the distance between them and takes Elsie's hand, the good one, the one without the cast. That's the ending, Libby says. That's the ending of the story. No, Elsie says. It's the beginning. In 81 years old, and I have just become a mother for the first time. That is not an ending. That's a door opening. Another night, another watch. That evening, Peter comes for dinner. He brings a roast chicken from the Greek deli and a bottle of lemonade for Persephone, who is staying over again while Roxanne works. They eat at the kitchen table, the four of them, Peter and Elsie and Persephone and Nugget, who sits on Persephone's lap and receives increasingly unsubtle portions of chicken. After dinner, Peter does the washing up while Elsie supervises Persephone's bedtime routine. The child is asleep by 8:30, worn out by a day of hula hooping on the front lawn and a dinner of roast chicken and the particular exhaustion of feeling safe enough to finally relax. Peter and Elsie sit on the porch in the dark. The street is quiet. The air smells like jasmine from Mrs. Nugent's garden and the distant salt of the bay. Shane was here last night, Elsie says. Fatty. Peter's jaw tightens. I saw the car. I was awake too. Did he try anything? He tried the door. Then he left. But hell be back. Then we'll be ready. Elsie repeats. She turns the word over like a smooth stone in her palm. Yes, Peter says, and his voice is steady, and his hand finds hers on the wooden arm of the porch chair. You are not alone in this, Mum. You have not been alone for a long time. You just didn't know it. They sit together on the porch, mother and son, watching the street where they have both lived for years, 2 houses apart, 2 lifetimes of silence between them, now bridged by a documentary and a confession and a word that neither of them knows quite how to use yet, but both of them are learning. At midnight, they go inside. Elsie checks the lock. Peter checks the windows. They do this without speaking, a choreography of shared vigilance, And when it is done, Peter sleeps on the sofa, and Elsie sleeps in her armchair, and Persephone sleeps in the blue flower bed, with Nugget curled in the hollow of her knees. No car comes in the night. Shane does not return, but the threat is not gone, it is only waiting. Elsie can feel it waiting, a pressure in the air, like the stillness before a summer storm. Like, she is ready. She has been ready her whole life. She killed a monster once, with an umbrella in a blood-soaked living room, and if another monster comes for the people she loves, now her son, her neighbor, the child who calls her Elsa and means grandmother, she will be ready again. She is Mad Mabel. She is Magnificent Mabel. She is a mother at 81, a protector after a lifetime of being unprotected, and she will not let the darkness take what she has finally found. The banner still flying. 3 days later, the banner still flies. Someone has paid for it to make a second pass, a third, a fourth. The words appear above Kenny Lane at noon each day, exactly when the sun is highest, the red letters blazing against the blue. Forgive, als, Mabel. Elsie does not know if forgiveness is the right word. She does not know if it is hers to give, but she stands on her porch each day and watches the plane cross the sky, and she feels something that is not quite forgiveness and not quite forgetting, but something adjacent to both. Something that feels like air after a long submersion, like the first breath after decades of holding her breath. Inside, on the kitchen table, is a letter from a legal clinic in Melbourne. They want to review her conviction. They believe they can have the murder charge reduced to manslaughter, perhaps even have her record expunged. But they call it a historic injustice and a child protection failure, and other phrases Elsie reads 3 times without fully absorbing. She will call them, eventually. For now, she has pancakes to make, a dog to feed, a son to learn, a child to watch over. For now, she has a story that has finally been told. The rest can wait. She has waited 66 years. She can wait a little longer. Outside, the plane banks and turns for another pass. Forgivusmabel. The words ripple across the sky, and Elsie watches them go. And then she goes inside and closes the door, and the house is quiet, and the kettle is on, and Nugget is at her feet. And somewhere in the spare bedroom, a box of photographs waits to be reopened, and on her wrist, a white cast waits for a new signature. And in the blue flower bed, a child is dreaming. And in the kitchen, a son is washing dishes, and Elsie walks into the center of her house and finds that she is, for the first time in 76 years, not alone. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. Episode 6. Forgive Us, Mabel. Elsie wakes to the sound of a machine beeping. It is a steady, rhythmic beep, the kind that announces alive, alive, alive with each pulse. She does not open her eyes immediately. She lies still and takes inventory. A dull ache in her chest, a tightness across her ribs, the particular weight of bandages beneath a hospital gown. Her left wrist is already in a cast. She remembers that, the protesters, the fake blood, Persephone signing her name in purple marker. But the chest pain is new. She opens her eyes, and Peter is asleep in the chair beside her bed. His head has fallen forward at an angle that will hurt when he wakes. His hand is resting on the blanket, inches from hers, as though he fell asleep mid-reach. On the windowsill behind him sits a vase of yellow roses and a plush unicorn with a rainbow horn. Elsie looks at the unicorn for a long moment. Then she looks at Peter. Her son. The words still sit strangely in her mouth, a smooth stone she is learning to hold. She moves her fingers. The movement costs more than it should. Peter startles awake. "Mum," he says, and the word comes out cracked and urgent. "You're awake." "I appear to be," Elsie says. Her voice is a rasp. "How long?" "2 days. You lost a lot of blood. The bullet," he stops. Swallows. "It nicked your lung. They had to operate. But you're going to be fine. And Persephone? Safe. Not a scratch. She's been here every day. Roxanne brings her after school." She left the unicorn. Elsie turns her head toward the window. The roses are fresh. Someone has been changing the water. "Jane?" she asks. Peter's face hardens. "In custody." The police were already on their way when he, Roxanne, called them the moment he broke in. They arrived about 30 seconds after the shot. He's been charged. Breaking and entering, kidnapping, attempted murder. is not getting out. Elsie closes her eyes. She feels the information settle into her bones. She promised Persephone she would protect her. She kept the promise. The cost was a bullet and a surgery and 2 days of her son watching her sleep, but she kept the promise. What about the documentary, she asks. Peter makes a sound that is almost a laugh. You've been unconscious for 2 days, and you're asking about the documentary. I'm asking about the documentary because I intend to live, and I want to know what's happened in the world while I've been indisposed. He tells her. The documentary went live the night she was shot. Adim and Libby finished the edit in a 48-hour sprint, driven by the urgency of what had happened on Kenny Lane. The first viewers were the ones who had heard about the shooting on the news. They clicked expecting a true crime story about a killer. They found a story about a child failed by everyone. They shared it. By morning, viewership had cracked 1 million. By the second day, 7 million. The banner went up this morning, Peter says, the one that says FORGIVEUSMABEL. Someone hired a plane. We don't know who. Elsie opens her eyes and looks at the ceiling. She has spent 66 years being Mad Mabel, and now a stranger has hired a plane to ask her forgiveness. She does not know what to do with this. She does not know if forgiveness is the right word, but something is shifting in her chest, and it is not the wound. The letter. 3 weeks later, Elsie sits at her kitchen table on Kenny Lane. She is home now, moving slowly, a cane by her chair that she resents and uses anyway. Persephone has decorated the cane with glitter stickers. Elsie has not removed them. Peter is making tea. Nugget is asleep on Persephone's lap. Persephone is drawing a picture of a dragon with 57 legs because, she explains, it runs very fast and needs all of them. On the table is a letter. It arrived that morning by registered post, thick and official, the return address a legal clinic in Melbourne. Elsie has read it 3 times. The clinic has reviewed her case. They have examined the original trial transcripts, the psychiatric reports, the journal pages that were entered as evidence. They have found what they describe as a systemic failure of child protection, a coerced confession obtained from a minor without legal representation, and a conviction that would not withstand modern judicial scrutiny. They are filing a petition to have her murder conviction overturned. It won't bring Cess back. Elsie says to Peter, who has set a cup of tea in front of her and is now reading the letter over her shoulder. It won't undo any of it. No, Peter says, but it matters. Does it? It matters that the state admits it was wrong. It matters that the record shows you were a child who needed help, not a monster who needed caging. It matters for you, and it matters for every other child who's been failed the same way. Elsie looks at the letter. She thinks about her father, about the unlocked porch door on the day Kitty died, about the slight smile on his face when he asked her about it in the hospital. She thinks about Cess crawling under a police desk to hold her. She thinks about Ness, adopting a newborn boy whose mother was a 15-year-old in a mental institution, raising him with love and never telling him the worst parts of the story. She thinks about the word overturned. It means something was upside down and now it will be righted, but she has been upside down for so long that she is not sure which way is up anymore. I'll sign whatever they need me to sign, she says. Peter puts his hand on her shoulder. She covers it with her own. A visit from Libby and Adim. That afternoon, Libby and Adim arrive with a cake and a camera and a question. The cake is from Mira, a dense chocolate thing that Elsie will eat for breakfast for the next 4 days. The camera is off. The question is the real reason they have come. We've been approached by a publisher, Libby says. They want to turn your story into a book. A proper book, not just a documentary. They want you to write it, or dictate it, or however you want to do it. They're offering in advance. Elsie stares at her. A book, a memoir, your story, in your words, with your name on the cover. Which name? Whichever name you choose, Adim says. Mabel Waller, Elsie, Magnificent Mabel, whatever you want. Elsie sits with this. A book, her name on a cover. People reading about Kitty and Cess and Ness and Daphne, who was never real but was the truest friend she ever had. People reading about the umbrella and the blood and the years in the institution and the babies she never held. I'll think about it, she says. Libby grins. Adim pours the tea. The third bedroom. That night, after Persephone has gone home and Peter has returned to his own house and Nugget is curled at the foot of her bed, Elsie walks to the spare bedroom. The door is open now. She has not closed it since the day she packed away the photographs of Peter, the shrine she built to a son she did not know she had. The boxes are still there, but the photographs are back on the walls. Not hidden now, displayed. Peter at 20, laughing at a barbecue. Peter at 30, holding a neighbor's baby. Peter at 40, gray at the temples, smiling at something off camera. Her son, her boy. She had no photographs of him as a child. That time was stolen from her. But she has the photographs Ness kept, the ones Peter brought over the day after the documentary. A shoebox full of images. Peter on his first day of school. Peter in a soccer uniform. Peter with a gap-toothed grin and a cake with candles. Ness had documented everything. Ness had loved him. Elsie stands in the doorway and looks at the photographs and does not cry. She has done enough crying. What she feels now is something quieter, something that sits in her chest like a stone worn smooth by water. It is not happiness, exactly. It is the absence of a pain she has carried for so long that she forgot it was there. Daphne, she says aloud, we did it. We survived. There is no answer. There never was. But the silence feels different now. Not empty, but full. Full of Peter's voice calling her mum. Full of Persephone's glitter stickers on her cane. Full of Libby's cake and Nadim's tea and Joan's apology and Roxanne's trust and a banner in the sky that asks her forgiveness. Full of a life she never expected to have. The final answer. The legal clinic's petition takes 8 months. Elsie spends them learning to be a mother to a 60-year-old son, a grandmother to a child who is not hers by blood but is hers by every other measure, a friend to people who walked into her house with a camera and stayed. In the spring, the court rules. The conviction is overturned. The charge reduced to manslaughter, the sentence commuted to time served. The judge's statement includes a line that the newspapers print and the documentary adds as an epilogue. The court acknowledges that Mabel Waller was a child who acted in defense of herself and her family under circumstances of extreme abuse and neglect. The failure was not hers. It was ours. Elsie reads the statement on her porch. Peter is beside her. Persephone is on the step, braiding Nugget's fur with rainbow elastics. The banner has long since stopped flying, but someone has planted a garden in the empty lot at the end of Kenny Lane, a community garden with a sign that reads ROSEHILL, and lavender bushes that bloom the exact color of the house where Elsie grew up. She is 82 years old. She has been Mad Mabel and Magnificent Mabel and Elsie and Mum and Elsa. She has been a daughter and an orphan and a prisoner and a recluse. She has been alone with an imaginary friend for 76 years, and now she is surrounded by real ones. She folds the court document and sets it on the porch table. Well, she says to Peter, 5. What shall we have for dinner? Peter laughs. Persephone shouts Pizza. Nugget barks. And Elsie Mabel Elsie Waller, acquitted, beloved, finally free, smiles, and goes inside to order the pizza, and closes the door on a house that is no longer a hiding place, but a home. The story does not end here because stories do not end, they only change shape. But if you drive down Kenny Lane on a warm evening, you might see an elderly woman on her porch, a man beside her, a child and a chihuahua at her feet. You might see her look up at the sky where a plane once flew, and you might see her smile. And if you ask her who she is, she will tell you, my name is Elsie, this is my family, and I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The interview has just ended on a threshold. Elsie has told Libby and Nadim that Peter is her son, and she has called it not an ending, but a door opening. Peter has called her mum for the first time. The two of them are sitting on her porch in the dark, and Shane's sedan has idled at the mouth of Kenny Lane, and the sentence hanging in the air is unfinished. Then well be ready. The listener knows what the story has already told them, that Elsie will die taking a bullet for Persephone, that the public apology will arrive as a sky-written banner dragged across a blue Melbourne sky, that the imaginary friend will pass to the next generation in the form of a girl named Daisy. The exoneration comes. It always comes. It just comes too late for the person who needed it. This is the specific ache the novel leaves behind. Not tragedy, not injustice overcome. Something quieter. The machinery of correction works, but only after it can no longer matter to the one who was wronged. There is a name for what was done to Elsie, and it is older than her case file. In 1979, Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar published The Madwoman in the Attic, their landmark study of how 19th century literature turned women who defied social norms into figures of monstrosity and hysteria. The madwoman was the woman who refused to be contained, Bertha Mason locked in Rochester's attic, the wife who would not stay quiet. She was a warning. She was what happened to women who pushed back. Hepworth takes that archetype and gives it the microphone. Mad Mabel is not a story about a woman mislabeled by a cruel press and then rehabilitated by a kinder one. It is a story about a woman who was never going to be believed, who understood early that her only available move was to lean into the accusation. Elsie does not spend 60 years trying to prove she is not mad. She throws dog feces over the fence. She calls people dipshit. She invents a friend so real to her that the friend becomes the oxygen in the room, and friends are like oxygen is the first thing the novel tells us before we understand what it means, and she refuses, for decades, for an entire lifetime, to explain herself to anyone who has already decided. The imaginary friend is not a twist. It is the structural argument of the book. Daphne is the part of Elsie that knows she deserves to survive, and she is also the evidence the world uses to confirm the mad label. End quote. Hepworth's move is to withhold Daphne's unreality from the reader, not as a narrative trick, but as an experience. The listener spends hours inside Elsie's consciousness, treating Daphne as real because Elsie treats her as real. The revelation lands not as a puzzle solved, but as a recalibration of everything that came before. You were inside the mind of a child so alone she had to create someone to love her. You thought you were watching a friendship. You were watching a survival strategy. The documentary frame makes the argument explicit. Libby and Adim arrive on Kenny Lane thinking they are making true crime content, a salacious piece about an elderly convicted murderer and a suspicious death. They discover they are documenting the machinery of social punishment. The audience experiences the same reversal. The camera was supposed to find a monster. It found a 15-year-old girl whose father told the town she killed her baby sister, whose teacher groomed her in the sports shed and locked her in afterward, who walked in on the only adult who ever protected her lying dead on the living room floor. The question the novel poses is not whether Elsie should have been convicted. She killed her father. She has never denied it. The question is whether a society that failed a child at every turn, that called her mad before she could read, that branded her a baby killer at 14, that took her baby from her without letting her hold him, should have been permitted to judge her at all. And then the novel does its quietest and most radical thing. It refuses to make her palatable for forgiveness. The documentary succeeds, the banner flies, the petition circulates. The police issue an apology, but Elsie is not softened by any of it. She is not grateful. She is not redeemed in the way that redemption stories demand. She is the same woman who was glad her abuser died, who kept a secret shrine to a son she could not raise, who sat on her porch for 60 years and waited for the past to catch up. The book argues, by its structure and by its voice, that a woman should not have to be likable to be believed. The mad woman in the attic was never mad. She was furious. And she had reason. Hepworth's contribution is to hand that fury the narrative and let it speak in its own voice, without apology, without softening, without the performance of gratitude that women are taught to wear when the world finally decides to be fair. The skywriting says, "Forgive us, Mabel." The novel does not say whether she forgives them back. That absence is the point.